Gotta get to work. It's getting quite late. It's 9:32. And I can't be late for work because I'm a very punctual man. Just gotta ride along. I hope my colleague Stephen A. Smith is actually gonna be a little early for the first time. Wait, hold on, that can't be. I think it might be. I think it's Stephen A. Hold on. Hey, Stephen A.
Yo, what's up, Max?
We gonna be late for work.
Yeah, my bad, bro.
Get in.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. That was a close one, Stephen. We're gonna be late.
Not bad, man. At least we're on the way to the studio now.
Hey, and today's discussion is gonna be amazing. We're gonna amaze a lot of people with the facts.
Yes, sir. We're talking about the amazing, illustrious career of one Marc Gasol.
And then Pistol Pete Photosynthesis Maravich.
The legend himself on the anniversary of his death.
Unfortunately passed away in 1980, but his legend will continue touching people and affecting them. And yeah, it's gonna be a great show.
See you at the studio, guys.
Welcome back to First Take. I'm Max Kellerman.
I'm Stephen A. Smith.
And today we're going to be talking about some legends, past and present.
Today we will be talking about the newly retired defensive beast Marc Gasol.
And the late Pete Maravich.
So, let's start with Marc Gasol. Or better,
Hold on, Stephen A. We forgot our sponsors.
Of course.
Got them Oreos.
Huge shout out to our sponsors, Oreos, as well as Phosphorade. They know how to keep us hydrated throughout the show.
Delicious. I'll even drink some right now.
It's really that good. Anyways, let's start with our boy Marc Gasol, or
Yes,
better
sir.
known in Spain as the sweeter man's Marc Glucose Gasol. Growing up, Gasol lived in the Spanish town of Cytoplasm, near the edges of the country, with his brothers Adria and Pau Gasol.
Hold on. Adria?
Adria, yes.
Sister.
No, their youngest brother of the three. He also...
Damn, you must have got roasted at school. I'm sorry, Adria.
It's Spain. It was probably a common name back then.
Nah.
Anyway, to start his basketball dreams, Marc needed to attend ADP Junior Collegiate. Here he would get the opportunities to start his flourishing basketball career, but he had to give up ATP to get into the league. And his family did not have a lot of ATP, but they believed in him, and they invested this ATP for him to start his career, hoping that they would pay him back. And oh, did he ever get to do that. But we'll get to that later. This ADP opportunity transformed him from Marc Gasol into the beast Marc Glucose 6-Phosphate Gasol, the defensive genius that he now is.
Scary, scary man.
Oh yes, he definitely got phosphorylated by the ATP that he sacrificed.
Look at this man. Don't tell me he don't look like a bear.
He was a bear, very fitting for the Grizzlies team that he played for.
Correct.
Anyway, as he entered his teen years and his isomers were rearranged and he became the sweeter man that he was known as today, Marc Fructose 6-Phosphate Gasol.
I'm sorry.
Is there anything wrong with that?
I can't help but laugh. I can't help but laugh. You're calling a man sweet.
It's a cool thing that the kids say these days. It's very appropriate for the show.
Appropriate?
We have to stay up with the ratings these days.
I'm offended. You called a man sweet.
It's a compliment to his family. Gave him some more ATP to renew his ADP contract for him to keep going there. But this also allowed for him to bring his brother into the league, Pau. So the two joined the junior leagues, and his family were once again phosphorylated by the loss of ATP, but the two brothers became a dominant tandem known as fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, and this was when Glucose Gasol was completely activated.
I beg to differ. I think Glucose Gasol was Glucose Gasol from the beginning. I don't think you have the knowledge to talk about this. Do you want me to take over right now?
Listen here, Max. This
Steven.
is my story, and I will proceed. you have your segment coming up, and I'll try not to, interrupt your false and inaccurate information that you usually end up saying to
I'm
the
gonna
audience.
take one from your book, Stephen A. Blasphemy.
The blasphemy that's gonna come out of your mouth, I'll call it out just as quick as it comes.
We'll see about that.
Anyway, back to my segment of the show. Eventually, the two brothers did graduate from ADP Collegiate, and they went their separate ways, but this was sadly known as the Gasol sugar splitting, as this would most likely be the last time that they would ever play together on a professional team. So, after the sugar splitting, Mark went to DHAP Collegiate and Pau went on to G3P University since he was a little bit older. However, Mark soon joined Pau at G3PU, and the two brothers thrived, but were often found in deep foul trouble in late times in the games, often fouling out. This, as a punishment, they were oxidized by NAD+ to become an NADH, but this only gave them more energy, as they used this energy to get more phosphate drinks to fuel up before games. These phosphorate drinks made them the new tandem of 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, or 1,3-BPG for short. As 1,3-BPG, the two began to earn ATP off of their phosphorate promotions, which were also transfers from their old ADP contract, as their jerseys were the largest selling in ADP collegiate history. They were the biggest players to come out of that school.
Some of the smartest businessmen, these two brothers, like the way they align their contracts. I hate to agree with Stephen A, but it's very phenomenal.
Definitely, at such a young age for both of them, they really had the mind of a very savvy businessman. So, after all of these ATP earnings, they knew that they had quite a good revenue coming in, so they decided to rename themselves as 3-phosphoglycerate, or 3PG for short. However, because as they were still in foul trouble, fouling out almost every game in crunch time when the team needed them most, they lost part of their phosphorate earnings, changing their name to a much lesser version of themselves, 2-phosphoglycerate, or 2PG for short. But then, because of even more foul trouble, 2PG lost their sponsorship of Dasani H2O, making them a much longer, much less attractive nickname of phosphophenylpyruvate. Nevertheless, they continued to earn from their ADP contracts as well as their G3P contracts, giving them even more ATP, and this was the main production of ATP for their family at the time, as well, since they did earn much more ATP coming up. The two grew to become pyruvate, and they were ready to join the league, and they earned back those 2 ATP that their family had invested into them for them to join basketball from the beginning.
And that's very respectable of them. Like they couldn't have done that. Like they could have just run away with the ATP, but the fact that they gave it back to their family, it's quite phenomenal how they look after their parents.
Definitely, of course, we can see how their humble belongings stayed with them even through all the fame. So, but before they applied for the draft, the two brothers decided to play for the Spanish national team. However, Pau soon left to focus on his NBA career as he entered the draft much before Mark did.
Solid 5 years.
5 years before Mark did. So Mark, when he moved to the team, he had to move from his hometown in the cytoplasm to the mitochondrial matrix, which was in the heart of Spain. On the way to join the team, he had to lose a few carbon parts of himself. He had to leave his family, which left him like CO2 leaving his body, and this was really the decarboxylation of himself. He also had to leave his best friend, Julio Hydrogen Hernandez. Because of the NAD+ that kept haunting him from his collegiate days, he knew he had to leave his friends behind for him to pursue his future and his dreams.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that it was the smartest decision for Mark to abandon a true friend and a true teammate over something as stupid as getting haunted by foul trouble.
This may have been him hunting from his foul trouble, but he knew if he left this past behind him, he would be able to earn for himself, his family, and represent his country in front of the world.
Think of it like this. You're saying you're moving up in the world. You're growing up. Do you leave your parents behind? Do you never have contact with your parents? Your parents are the ones that raised you. Do you leave them?
This was not leaving them, Max. This was going out on yourself, betting on yourself, and then returning when you knew you could.
He abandoned his friend.
but he paid them back when he could.
With what? Hugs?
With what's to come, as I will explain.
Okay.
So when
I'll
he
agree.
did come to the Spanish team camp, he arrived and he met his new teammate, Ricky Coe Rubio. And he used the remaining carbon that he had on himself to become the duo of Aceto Coe, meshing with Rubio perfectly. So this duo of Rubio and Gasol tore up and dominated through games. The duo began to practice with teammate Rudy Oxalo Acetate Fernandez, and the trio became known as Citrate. However, after a few games of playing with each other, they realized there was much less team play and more isolation game, with one man usually handling each possession, and they became known as Isocitrate.
Corny.
Well, they were young, let them have it. They were trying to stay cool with the times.
Corny.
So after a couple more games into exhibition play, the team decided to finally start cutting players, those who didn't belong, to represent the beautiful country of Spain. One of those players that they had to get rid of was Jimmy Carbon Dioxide Changa. He was a great defensive presence on the team, but the coach knew that he was also too much of a liability with all of the turnovers that he averaged. This changed them. Then the coach also decided to change up the game plan by oxidizing the NAD plus lineup into an NADH lineup, which completely changed their style of play. This also made their team into a much cooler name of Alpha Keto Glutarate.
Cooler?
It might have been longer, but it must have been something cool in Spanish at the time of their play.
I'm sorry to say, but it sounds like a condition my grandmother would have.
Well, you probably just disrespected a lot of Spanish fans who understand what that means, Max, so shame on you, sir.
Sounds more Latin than Spanish.
They were from Spain.
But the name sounds Latin.
Well, that's besides the fact that they were a dominant team. Soon after, their teammate Ricky Coe Rubio returned from an injury to change the team to a Susno Coe. But this made the offense much more based around him, as he was the primary ball handler at the time. However, he was swiftly injured again in the next game and had to leave the team again, changing it to a Sussinate team. Here, the team was based more around Gasol, as he would get more touches, more minutes, and put up more shots than he ever had. At this time, the team was also supposed to get their first paycheck from the national team. However, this was also when the controversial Spanish pay scandal occurred. The GDP tax was turned into a GTP tax, and this tax was deducted from each paycheck from the players without their knowledge of it.
2006 was a dark time for Spanish sports.
It really was.
I thought it involved the government, but I wasn't aware that it actually involved the sports players. I wasn't aware of that. Can you elaborate?
Sadly, the team really picked on the young players at the time, who were much naive at the time about their financial records, and they simply took money from them in tax money, where they really just kept it for themselves.
That's just not right.
It was so wrong for the national team to even be allowed to keep participating after this, because they knew that their players were continuously getting disrespected. However, eventually, the phosphorate premiums that the players earned from their advertising were transferred for GTP to the ADP, and this ADP was finally transferred to the ATP that the players deserved. So after this whole scandal occurred, the Spanish team decided to fire their new coach. They fired their old coach and to hire a new coach.
I was about to say Stephen A. That makes no sense.
No, their new coach, who was a young coach at the time, but he grew to be one of the best coaches in the world. After the coach decided to oxidize their shooting coach from an FAD to an FADH2, really changing their style of play into a much more 3-and-D type of game.
I don't think that was an appropriate measure. He had nothing to do with this entire situation.
It may not have, but a new coach means a new way to play the game and a new vision, a point of view of how the game is seen and how he sees the floor.
Look at this point of view. This man has a family to feed. How's he going to do that?
Find another job.
This is a professional sports team. They're trying to make people find other jobs.
It's a professional sports team that knows nothing but business, and humans play no factor in a business world.
And a business must pay their employees.
And that's why you must upgrade from employees who satisfy your odds and who satisfy your needs of wanting and getting your success. Anyway,
good point.
From here, the new coach revitalized their game from from the old mid-range type of style to a more 3-and-D lifestyle. From here, the team set out for the FIBA World Cup, and the final team, known as Fumarate, went into the elimination rounds. In the semifinals, the team was offered a Fiji water sponsorship, which they took gleefully as they knew that Fiji was also an up-and-coming brand, as they would be able to get more and more ATP and money from these advertisements. But Fiji also made them change their brand name to Maltate as per part of their contract, and the Spanish team willingly did so as they knew it would probably become a good investment. Before the finals started, the coach proposed one last change to his game plan, where he oxidized the defensive coach from NAD+ to an NADH, and this created the final supreme team of oxaloacetate. This team went on to win the FIBA World Cup, and Marc Gasol averaged 27 points, 15 rebounds, 2.5 blocks. Gasol was thriving as he went on to win the FIBA World Cup Finals MVP. After this, Gasol left for the NBA draft in 2006, and the oxaloacetate team continued on to play in the Olympics, picking up more young players along the way, just like they picked up Gasol, hoping for a better future of their national team.
Wow, very hopeful. Gasol was a one-of-a-kind player.
One of a kind.
You ain't gonna find another.
They're not going to find another Gasol from the collegiate schools in a long, long time. So, after Gasol entered the draft, he knew he had to go to the U.S., and in the U.S. he went to the mitochondrial matrix that was located there. Marc Gasol was drafted by the Los Angeles NADH dehydrogenase, which was a protein team at the time, and with the 48th pick, which I find absolutely ridiculous. This man just came off a World Cup Finals MVP, averaging 27 and 14, more than most players average that are already in the NBA. And this is a young man, possibly in his prime already, just coming into the league. He should have been a top 3 pick in the league.
But to be fair, he wasn't in basketball shape. He was shaped like a basketball.
Fair enough. Gasol may have been a little out of shape at the time.
A little. This man's a big boy.
But he dominated the paint like no big man internationally could have.
Basketball is not only about skill, it is about court presence. That boy looked like he couldn't take on a teddy bear.
But his presence was always felt, regardless of who was on him or who was defending him.
Basketball is a mental sport. That's all I'm saying. You see him, you're not intimidated. You're fairly happy.
It's also a physical sport, and people would understand that once they get knocked down by his size.
Fair point.
Anyway, 5 years before Gasol entered the draft, his brother Pau entered the draft, and he was drafted by the Memphis Ubiquinone. However, on draft night, Pau was traded for Marc in a 2-team deal, sending Marc to Memphis and sending Pau to Los Angeles, causing Marc's time with the NADH dehydrogenase shortcut. But his rookie contract was reduced from an NADH to an NAD+, and sadly he did lose on some hydrogen endorsements from his brother. But with the Ubiquinone, Gasol thrived and was the main attraction in the city. He was the young presence that everyone was excited to see. And there he got even more hydrogen endorsements from the reduction of the FAD to H2 to an FAD. Here, the coaching staff was all about him. They wanted him to be the best player on the team, and they knew he was the star of the team. Memphis even brought in role players like Mike Conley and Zach Randolph, and this team declared themselves as the B6 Complex, which was also now another protein team instead of the previously coenzyme team of Ubiquinone.
Well, this was a good move on both sides. Both brothers got out of what they wanted out of the situation. Pau got championships, and Marc got a place to develop.
Marc developed into quite the player as we saw, and Pau himself had his success in Los Angeles. But at the trio of Zach Randolph, Mike Conley, and Marc Gasol, they became the grit and grind of Memphis. And this trio went on to have great success, but never made the NBA Finals. But they were so close of making it, just a few games away at certain years. In this time, Gasol also won Defensive Player of the Year, which gave him 2 more Electron endorsements for his time. This gave him much more ATP, and as well as gave him a larger contract than the rest of the stars. But however, with sunshine there's also rain, and the rain poured hard on Memphis. The rough period and such a dark time in Memphis was known as the Cytochrome C. Here, the team didn't make the playoffs at all. and this sadly resulted in them trading Gasol. Gasol was sent to the Toronto Cytochrome Oxidase Complex, or the Toronto COC. But here Gasol may not have been the main attraction, but he was a huge role player for the team and was still the starting center. Here he met his final electron acceptor, which was oxygen, and the electron endorsements joined with the oxygen to provide him with that hydration. And this hydration turned to be the key to success that Toronto needed. Toronto went on to win the NBA title that year, and Gasol was completely satisfied with his career after that. Gasol soon retired in the offseason, getting his final paycheck along with his final phosphorate check to give him his final ATP, ending his Hall of Fame career.
Quite a career.
Quite the career, for sure. Here he got the most ATP he could have asked for his family and supplied his family back, paying them back for when they invested in him so many years ago.
And even giving them more. He didn't just give them what he owed them, he gave them almost half of what he earned.
Much more. Gasol, being such a humble being himself, grown and raised so maturely, he knew what he had to do and who to pay back. Gasol had all of the awards that he could have wanted, an NBA championship, a defensive player of the year in his prime, and now he can retire with a ring on his finger, satisfied, alongside his brother. The two brothers, the only brothers in the NBA history to win an NBA championship each. Fun fact about the Gasol brothers.
I didn't know that was true.
They're pretty good,
Wow.
especially in their primes.
Interesting.
This ending the Hall of Fame career of Marc Gasol, grit and grind will always be in his blood, and a defensive presence has really left the league. And people will definitely start driving into the lane more, knowing that Gasol's not there to defend the paint anymore.
Although we do have some promising young talent, no one will be like Gasol.
No, not for sure. The man really revitalized himself, especially when he started shooting threes. He knew no one could stop him then.
Progress with the game.
Progress with the game, grow with the game, and you'll succeed with the game.
Alright, but Stephen A., I gotta tell you one thing. Marc Gasol was nothing compared to Pete Maravich. You wanna know why? They call him Pete Photosynthesis Maravich.
And why would they call him that?
Because photosynthesis was a player which entered the league at a very early stage.
We'll get back to that story after this break.
Are you ready? Let's go. This is my hot take. You couldn't believe what they mean. That's a disgrace. I'm hyped. Let's go. Don't stop with me. Let's get it on. Let's go. The blast.
Alright, and we're back from commercials. Here to now Max Kellerman would present his part of the segment on legendary Pistol Pete, Photosynthesis Maravich.
Well, like I said, photosynthesis was a major part of the early existence of the league, as it is a major part of human's life. Photosynthesis started his life with photoexcitation. When he was born, by his parents, Peter Chloroplast and Helen Chloroplast, gave him a very low-key life because they didn't really want him to live that star life and have the expectations of a son of a basketball player, as his father did play basketball. This all changed when they realized his skill in the sport of basketball. It had struck them like a photon of light. They were now very energized and were on his case to become a basketball player.
Wow, they sound like very supportive parents.
Unfortunately, too supportive, because this excited state they were in didn't last long.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
Because they were becoming stable very quickly as they returned to the ground state.
Oh no.
This climaxed when his dad was glowing and emitting heat with rage.
Excuse me?
He was glowing and he was emitting heat,
Ah, okay. As
Yes.
one does.
as one does, to cause him to lose energy, giving his father the nickname of fluorescence.
Huh.
Weird. I would go with Florence, but fluorescence works too. This all had an effect on Mrs. Chloroplast, as her mind, which was made up of electrons, started getting captured by a disease called Alzheimer's, which was a primary electron acceptor. It finally got oxidized, and the primary electron acceptor got reduced, causing her to completely lose her mind. After this tragedy, it leads to the next stage of Mr. Photosynthesis' life, which was the photosystems. There were two photosystems, and it went from photosystem 2 to 1. Very confusing, but it was like a countdown, final countdown. Do-do-do-do. Photosystem 2 was his college career. As his talent struck everyone like a photon of light, and talk of him was like transfer of energy bouncing around from on antenna chlorophyll molecules. Finally, word got out to his father, who just took the position at Louisiana State University as the head coach, and he was a primary acceptor, P680. This still wasn't enough for photosynthesis, but the void he had was filled by hydrogen. His hydrogen fans, to be exact. And these hydrogen fans were broken up from H2O, which were the fans of the team. He also got a part-time job, which was the B6F complex, to pay for his schooling, as he didn't get a scholarship. Photosynthesis had also gained hydrogen fans from BCF during his transition from high school to college, as he was one of the most coveted players during his transition, and he had a lot of hype. Correct?
Correct. Pistol Pete was really one of those once-in-a-lifetime type of players that people just came out to see. He was the main attraction throughout his career.
And guys, this was in the 60s. Social media wasn't a thing.
It was all word of mouth or posters or anything. There was no websites. There was no Pistol Pete Instagram fan accounts. This was all just him. And the fact that he was such an attraction to everyone. He attracted fans and photographers and paparazzi. He was just the celebrity of basketball at the time.
Phenomenal talent.
Great talent.
And with the talent came with a great personality, as he kept in contact with all of his fans, which he put in his contact book, which he called the Stroma. He was now within Photosystem 1. It was the same process as Photosystem 2, as he hits all of the teams like a photon of light, and was bouncing around the NCAA, averaging 44.2 points per game.
I'm sorry, what?
44.2 points per game.
44.2. That's the highest average points.
3,687 collegiate points.
The most points in NCAA history.
And no one's come close to it.
No one would come close to it.
And this is before shot clocks and even three-point lines were around.
If the three-point line existed in Pistol Pete's time, this man could have averaged 60 points a game.
I'm saying 70.
He could have put Kobe's 81 to shame. He could have challenged Wilt's 100 points.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
What a player. An absolute bucket getter.
And because of this 44.2 points per game, he obliterated every single team he came across. He was doing this till he returned the next year, and then the next year, and then for more years, making his domination cyclic. As he repeated the same thing over and over again for 4 years, sheer and utter domination. He finished getting his diploma after the 4 years, and therefore he graduated. And his graduation was a primary acceptor P700.
Makes sense.
After he graduated, he called his fans just to have a party with them, to hang out with them. And they all surprised him with ATP, which he later turned into cash. This all led to the Calvin cycle, which was his NBA career. And because of the talent that was in the NBA, he was piped down to CO2, meaning he was no longer known as photosynthesis, he was only known as CO2.
Wow, the NBA really tried to humble him, as they didn't really want such a young player to come in and just be the main factor. They didn't want to be dominated by such a young presence at the time.
And because of this, he didn't even stand out. He combined it with the rest of the draft, which was the RUBP. He got catalyzed by a team called the Atlanta Rubiscos. This team's style was completely different compared to his. Therefore, he needed to change his playing style if he wanted to remain in the lineup and help them win.
Smart player. He knew that he had to adjust with the circumstances around him to stay prevalent within the league and to become successful. Even just as a rookie, he knew that.
And because of this, he went from being known as CO2 to 3 PGs. That's 3 Paul Georges. That's how good he was. That's before even Paul George was around.
He probably was the same, just as good as 3 Paul Georges at the time.
To be completely honest, he probably was. And he had some early success because of that. And it was short-lived because of an injury, which he was phosphorylated in therapy by turning ATP to ADP. He came out of the injury as a different player. He started calling himself 1-3 BPG, as he had broken 1 bone in 3 different spots.
Wow, these injuries really got to him throughout his career. 1 bone in 3 different spots. If I remember correctly, it was his femur, the biggest bone in the body.
Could have killed him.
Could have definitely ended his career right there and then, just in his sophomore year.
And his life.
Wow, that's
phenomenal.
It's crazy how he returned.
And this wasn't even the only adversity that this young legend would face. Shortly after he came back from injury, he was asserting his domination on the league, his father sadly passed away. He then took some time away from the game, just trying to figure some stuff out. Unfortunately, when Pete did come back, he was heavily addicted to LSD.
Wow, this was took such a toll on such a young superstar's life. The passing of his father really affected him so hard that he had to leave the game, and him isolating himself from his family, his friends, from the media, it really just forced him into such a dark, dark place at the time.
And because of this addiction, he reduced NADH to NAD+. This changed his insides, and he now became G3P.
Completely changed who he was as a player and as a person.
At this point, Pete's love of the game wasn't there, and his focus was just 1/6 on basketball, causing him to slowly but surely retire. In his 10th year in the NBA, Pete retired, and he then became a mentor to the new draft class, which was the RUBP. So he did do some good after coming out of the league. And this causes his investment of time to turn into of ATP to become a major player. Antonio Davis Perdue, also known as ADP. So ATP, his time, turned into ADP, the player. And this player did the same for the next draft class, as Pete was no longer doing this. And because of this time that Pete put into Antonio found another star, another CO2 that entered the draft. And this happens repeatedly every year, making it cyclic. And this is the impact that Pete had on everyone. As this is still a tradition going on today, as LeBron James, Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, all these players do that to even some of the younger guys, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He mentors the younger guys coming into the league, although he's just a sophomore.
These Pistol Pete's impact on the league really showed how mentorship is important to help the young guys really come into this league, as they don't know what they're up against. They're just, as soon as they enter the league, bam, no one's taking it easy on them just because they're rookies. They're getting the full force of the game no matter what. And it's crazy to see, even so many decades after his passing, the tradition stays on, like as you said, with LeBron James, Jimmy Butler, and even Shai Gilgeous-Alexander mentoring his own cousin, Mikhail Alexander-Walker, who just came into the league. These two grew up together, and now they're both in the NBA, and one gets to mentor the other with their knowledge of the league, really making sure that they both succeed as much as they can.
Well, with all this on your mind, I'm just saying, Pistol Pete had more of an impact than Marc Gasol.
Pistol Pete may have had more of an impact at his time, but Marc Gasol in this generation was really much of a bigger force to be reckoned with.
To this day, John Havlicek says Pistol Pete was the greatest dribbler of all time. To this day, he's seen it all.
That's very true, but in this generation, we also have players like Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry, who have arguably the best handles of all time.
That's what makes him more impressive. He's seen all of these players, yet he still says Pete Maravich.
Fair enough.
On that note,
that's a good point. Can't argue on that one.
On that note, we are ending our episode. Although not traditional, it was a very special episode, and we both wanted to do this as these players are near and dear to our hearts.
This is a really good episode, just to show some respect to some legends of our game, past and present, making sure, and really showing people that their presence was felt throughout the league, even after they left.
And we'll see you next time.
I'm Stephen A. Smith.
And I'm Max Kellerman.
See you next time. On next week's episode, we'll talk about why LeBron James is the GOAT.
I think he means Michael Jordan.